Hello, everyone. Hi out there. Welcome to the musical QuaranStream with Glenn and Bree. I am Glenn,
I'm Bree.
and this is the twice weekly show where we show up and we talk about musicals and theater and the arts and movies and television and stuff
And
like that.
current events more and more.
Yes, and we pitch our ideas for shows that we, as theater artists and writers, would really, really love it if someone would actually pay for us to do them.
Yeah, theater writers, directors, props artisans.
Mm,
We've basically kind of grown up doing it all, and so I
yeah,
think that that's why pitching musicals, talking about the history of musical theater has come fairly natural to us, and we're glad if you happen to find us on YouTube or found us here on Twitch.
yeah. And hello, Bristol. We see Bristol is in the chat room. Nice to have you with us.
As you might see, we got some lovely new lighting. You can see
Yes.
my glasses being reflected. We're really excited. We're trying to make this a professional operation here. Found a lovely ring light on sale, and it's been kind of on the wish list for a little bit. So we're glad that you can finally see our lovely pandemic faces.
Yes, it's like ever since we moved the show into this room, it's been a little bit dark on our faces because
It's been raining.
and the overhead light is like right behind us, so it wasn't showing our faces off all that well. Now we actually have a light you can see us.
Not just our desk lamp either.
Yeah.
So we're really trying. I was like, I hope that, by the end of the pandemic, by the end of quarantine,
Yeah.
we're going to have all this investment in equipment. So if you're looking for a production company in Central Virginia,
Yeah, and
we will help produce your content.
yes. And it is a process for us. We, like Bree said, we're kind of used to doing it all on our own. And for video production, I'm used to doing a lot on my own with low budgets, that sort of thing. And if you saw the last video for The Film Optimist, which was uploaded and became public just this past Monday, but my Patreons got to see it earlier, so if you want to see videos early, sign up for the Patreon. But if you saw that video, you might have noticed that it looked less like a video of me and more like a moving impressionistic painting of me. And that was a combination of low light and some really unfortunate choices on my part for settings on the camera.
Also, the background's going to change a little bit as well. So we're still moving into this location, this place, and we're still digging out microphones, and we were just talking about, don't we have an LED box light somewhere? So there's stuff that you're going to see. Kind of, hopefully, the quality of everything improving. I think kind of our next big goal is. Hopefully, knock on wood, if there's ever other stimulus checks. Both of our computers are fairly old. Mine's from 2008, and this one is
around 2009, I believe.
So neither one of them are completely fantastic for recording. We do have a camcorder, but I think being able to have kind of a more modern computer for our editing software is going to be important. So fingers crossed that by this fall or, in the winter or spring of 2021, we'll be real professional kids up in here.
Yeah, Adobe software keeps getting better and better. Unfortunately, it also keeps taking up more and more memory. So anyway, that's I guess state of the company here.
Yeah. So if you are making an investment on our Ko-Fi account, on our Bookshop account, or on Patreon,
yes,
you now know what your stocks have been buying,
yes,
and what the return on your investment is. And if you haven't, I'm not going to say that you have to contribute. We really are pleased that we get to bring this content to you for free. But if you like it and you want to have some say in kind of the direction that we go in, money talks.
Yeah.
We are not running for president, so we're at least somebody else asking you for money at this point.
Yes.
So anyway, not much to really kind of report on the old entertainment news. I don't know. I was like, let's just be honest, folks. I cried a lot this weekend. It was a real hard weekend. I hate to kind of be this shallow. Like, there are big things that we're out there missing. Like, I wish I could visit my family. I think it's really sad that people can't spend time with loved ones in hospitals if they need to, or to be able to celebrate with friends on dinners and stuff. But it's like, I miss window shopping in places. I miss smelling candles in stores. I miss playing with the Coca-Cola Freestyle machine. Like, there's just a lot of things that have just been kind of getting to me the longer we're in quarantine. A lot of my job is kind of spent fighting and doing paperwork of why we shouldn't go into COVID wards with infected patients to consent them to studies. It's all getting resolved. It's all fine. But there is a lot of like pressure that I noticed needed to really kind of be blown off this weekend. So I paid a little less attention at being distracted through media and just, had a good cry. It's fine. We're all fine.
Yes, we had... this weekend was for crying and deciding how we're gonna paint the wall.
I'm really excited.
And
not about crying, about painting the wall.
and finding the stuff that would make like our lives easier. So
yeah, I also had a major piece of my technology for work break, which was very upsetting. I've had to invest in a couple of things that make working from home a little bit easier. And not that I don't think my work would do it, but I'm still kind of on a probationary period. So I bought this portable monitor at the start of the pandemic and not working anymore. So I had to go buy a new portable monitor. And then when I went to the store, they don't keep it in stock because... well, shipping lines are all messed up and, people would just touch it.
Yeah.
So there always seems to be kind of something. And, gosh, it's like, I just hate to sound like ungrateful. Like, I'm so glad that everybody's working to keep us safe. And, like, I'm, of course, not upset about anything. We just do the best we can and move on. We roll with the punches. We're older millennials. That's what we do.
Yep.
But yeah, it does kind of, like, I miss a good browse. I miss a good spontaneous go get an ice cream or a coffee. Like, last night I tried an aerobics class, which was super fun. It's called AKT, who apparently, like, the lady who runs it, like, trained Shakira or whatever.
Oh, wow.
But I was, like, doing some research, and they only allow 5 people into the class, and then it's, like, this really strong HEPA filter, and so you're really distanced from everybody. So I did it, and I really liked it, and then I thought, oh, well, we'll just go out to dinner while we're out here. Well, there's no sit down anywhere in diners, so at that point, it's like, well, let's just go home.
Yeah.
So there's no spontaneous, like, I worked out for a whole hour. Let's go get a steak.
Well, and I've seen, of course, at the beginning of the pandemic with the quarantine and everything, there were all of the memes going around about how great this was for introverts. And I've seen a few more of those popping up where, like, people have been doing the breakdown by month and the images get worse and worse. And they used... the image of the guy from The Office who retires, showing how, he starts off and he's dull, dreary in the office, and then getting happier and happier in retirement as the pandemic goes on. And I was like, as someone who is a bit of an introvert himself, I'm like, that is not my experience with the pandemic. It has not been, this is so wonderful, I'm an introvert, I don't have to deal with people anymore. It's like, well, I always... liked having the option of going out and like picking a place like, say, the library to go to.
Yep. But and I think like that's another big thing. Like as creative people, we're inspired by seeing other creative people. We're inspired by just kind of happen chances of walking around in the woods or going down to the downtown mall and walk around. And so I feel like, you might be a bit of an ambivert more than an introvert. You've
mentioned that before, yeah.
But, like, I'm an extrovert, and so it's been really hard because not that I want to be around all people all the time. I want to be around people with a certain energy, and that's why I was really looking forward to the dance class because, like, theater's just not happening anytime soon, and for me, Zoom has been hard, and, I'm just going to talk about my experiences because maybe it's you as well. Zoom has been a bit hard because it's almost like... I'm talking with people on TV or on movies. Like, it's almost like shocking when you see somebody in person because all of a sudden you're like seeing a celebrity. And I think it's very isolating. I've been going into the office all this week and I really like it because I can check in with all my office mates, even if it's just 6 feet apart, to be like, how is your day going? How's this happening? Because it's very easy for me to get caught up in, oh gosh, I'm not doing anything important. They must be doing all the important stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't feel like I'm busy at all. They must be really busy. And then you kind of realize, like, no, everybody's feeling the exact same way and having the exact same anxieties and everything. But it is really hard. And I think that that's the thing that I really kind of like about having a social group that's in the office, is I feel like we all really support each other. It's a really positive environment. But being from home, it's very easy for you to forget that, you know, just because your life is a little bit different right now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not contributing or you're not doing the job that you're supposed to do. And I've been working harder at taking care of my health, which has been taking me a lot out of the office to begin with as well, which has been really hard. And I'm trying to work on setting some boundaries and saying what I need in order to kind of like be a better employee and be healthier. And it's been a bit of a trauma, but hopefully, you know, our stories will help you feel less alone, or maybe the things that you're going through is normal. We're all going to get through this together. And, you know, if you'd like to tweet at us, we check our Twitter all the time.
Yep.
We'd be happy to bemoan situations with you.
Yes, I check my Twitter way too much.
Or if you'd like to post a comment on this on YouTube or talk in the chat, anything, you know, I think being able to talk about things openly is very important. And, you know, it's kind of a good theme because we're going to be talking about Kate Chopin.
Yes.
And she deals a lot with, I mean, particularly feminine Southern Gothic angst.
Yes.
But, you know, in general, like more of a psychological writer. I think kind of one of the more first ones that we've seen in a lot of literature. So.
Yeah. And that is launching us on a brand new theme, which is, if you're joining us, our past couple of weeks were social topics.
That's over.
Yeah. So we are now moving on to the next theme, and the next theme is that we're looking into actual adaptations of literature.
Yeah.
And Bria's starting us off, as she said, with Kate Chopin.
And we've done like literature before, so if you want to go back and look at some of our older episodes, we have delved deep into kids' books, and you know, we have done some book type of material. Books have been really popularly adapted into musicals. Fun Home, Hamilton by Ron Chernow. So I feel like it's not a big stretch, but I think for this time around, I was looking more at shorter stories.
Yeah.
Because sometimes that leaves you with a larger amount of adaptation. We're actually talking about what are some things we do when we're looking at an adaptation, because there are some people who very strictly go about adaptation. I'm taking out chunks of the book that really won't fit into my 2.5 hour limit or my 2 hour limit, and then taking the good bits.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to go ahead and keep kind of maybe the overall feel of the book and the overall like truth of the canonical story, but mostly then anything kind of goes. You know, it's like I want to hit the big things people remember about it. And this is why I like Wait in the Wings, which is a great YouTube channel. They talked about how Beetlejuice and Matilda were kind of that way, where it's like I'm going to hit the big pieces of what those stories are, but they do kind of deviate a little bit. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And then there's other people where it's almost like an inspired by, or just on the off chance that they don't grant me the rights, I'm just going to kind of write my own story. But maybe the characters are kind of more truthful. I would say Fun Home is kind of like more of a strict thing. And then Alexander Hamilton is kind of like on the other side of it, you know, more of a looser.
Wicked is another good example of a very loose adaptation of its source material, where it took really sort of the core ideas of the book, and didn't pay quite as much attention to the plot of the book. Didn't try to do a by the numbers adaptation, but said let's explore that emotional core more.
Yeah, but they did kind of like hit all the big parts, like with the baby screen, and you know,
yeah.
So there are kind of chapters, but like obviously they could have put everything into it. And I think that if you read the book, you would definitely feel like, oh gosh, I missed some stuff, or maybe you would be kind of inspired to be like, oh, I'm going to go buy the book.
Well, I think the big thing for me in looking at how Wicked was adapted is that the book of Wicked is a very, very heavy political satire. And the show is more of a show about friendship and the importance of community and things like
Yeah.
that. But, you know, we're getting far afield there talking about that.
Well, I would also say, like, maybe something a little bit closer, although it's, like, I know not super close. I think Les Mis hits all those things.
Yeah.
Les Mis, like, for all of its faults, it's not a strict adaptation, but I do feel like the way Les Mis goes, if you've seen it on a made-for-TV movie, or if you read the book, is actually pretty close to the main points that you hit in the musical.
Yeah.
Versus Phantom of the Opera, which is, I think, a little bit funkier.
Yes.
And actually, Lindsay Ellis does a really good takedown of all the adaptations and musicals of Phantom of the Opera. If you want to check that out.
Yeah.
So that's kind of our discussion today is like, how would I adapt a short story?
Yeah.
And I was just kind of interested in this. So my experience with this is, I'll be honest, I was not an English major.
Okay.
Unlike some people. And so I didn't... Gosh, it sounds so bad. I didn't do as much reading as I think I probably should on stuff in college. My college experience, we had some overlap in theater, but I was always very much pushed towards, you know, you could do technical theater. You could be a theater writer or a director. Like, you probably shouldn't be a performer. Because there's a lot of girls in this program, and there's more talented than you. That's probably not true, but that's how it felt, all right? I'm an emotional person. So I didn't really have a lot of strong literary stuff I had to do, aside from reading kind of like the more classical pieces, Stanislavski, some viewpointsy thingsies, and the plays for directing class. So it's like, so I read stuff, but in the grand scheme of things, I wasn't reading like literature. The literature focus that I ended up doing is I did Shakespeare. I was big into Shakespeare. So I did that. That was my English. I did comedy, which was essentially, we got some Eugenie Ionesco in there. We got some Mark Twain. So I think those are kind of my two reading classes I had to do for my degree. And then I did a lot more along the lines of, like, I was thinking for a while about a philosophy minor. And so I did a lot of philosophy classes that I really don't use all that much, except when I was kind of interested in programming. Because philosophy talks a lot about logical arguments, and that's really important in computer programming. And then, of course, I had to take, because I started off for half of my college career going through basic chemistry and then organic chemistry. So I was doing a lot of science and I was doing a lot of calculus. So even though I really liked English as a high schooler, my mom was an English teacher for a while, and I read a lot in high school, like even like classical books for fun. like I always liked, like Tom Jones and Gulliver's Travels and Horatio Hornblower, and like I liked that Edwardian, Victorian type of era. That was just kind of like my jam. Obviously, from somebody who liked Gilbert and Sullivan. I don't know why. I like Jane Austen. I like the Bronte sisters. It's just that whole, I think, what my parents knew as classical literature.
Yeah.
I liked that. And then probably like Michael Crichton. Like I didn't like a whole lot of like modern writers. I've been kind of catching up on modern writers. But so I didn't really read her,
Really?
when I think I should have read her. I was actually exposed to Kate Chopin when I was teaching a creative writing class, and I was actually brought in, and for the first half of the year, we talked about doing story structures and doing research. And so kind of my strengths were like, here's how you build a story, and here's how you carry through character lines, and here's how we're going to diagram this out and plot this out. And we would do like little things like that, but we'd also do kind of like secondary and primary source materials. We'd also do like, I want you to write a biography, or I want you to do an interview. So like learning writing techniques in order to kind of like tell a story later. And then in the second half, this was like bit of an artsy-fartsy school. So if you're in Floyd, Virginia, and Springhouse School, I can tell you, I was not the best teacher that was there. I was really, really pleased to be there and teach there and work as part of that community. I was so enthusiastic that I was let in and able to talk about why I love writing and literature and drama. I probably was not the best person that they had doing all that, if I'm 100% honest. I feel like I wish I could have been better for them, but I was always pleased that they gave me a chance, and I got to work with them for a year. I actually had somebody come in from Radford University, and he's the one that's like, I love this author, you should read her. And I knew Flannery O'Connor and stuff like that, but I was like, oh, okay. And then I realized, well, maybe I read some of her short stories when I was in like middle school and high school, but I never really kind of put it like together until really, really recently, like 2015, 2016.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I really kind of is a new fan, and I know that you said that you've had a lot more experience with her probably earlier on as an English literature person. Come here, Lola.
Yeah, Lola has hopped up on the table to see what's going on.
Sit in the ring, but she's right to my right, so she's just off screen.
Well, yeah, I mean, my first exposure to Kate Chopin, I probably read Kate Chopin a little bit younger than maybe a lot of people encounter her work because, hey, she's just barely poking up into the frame here now. Because Kate Chopin is, I would say, typically something that is reserved for more mature audiences. And I audited a college literature class when I was in middle school. And one of the stories that we read was Kate Chopin, was the rainstorm. And so,
oh, no.
So I was sort of exposed to this author who was very, very different from a lot of the other material that we read in that class, because we were reading early American authors. And as everybody say hi, Lola has decided to grace us with her presence in this video.
So Lola does not normally eat cables. She's not our kitty who does that. But she likes the ring light cable because she's a Hollywood kid.
Yes.
And she seems determined to eat that cable.
Yes. Oh. I've had to chase her away from it twice today so far, so.
All right. Goodbye.
Yes. But Kate Chopin, and I always thought that Kate Chopin was very interesting. I do really like, you mentioned Flannery O'Connor, who's another author who's known for the Southern Gothic.
Zora Neale Hurston. Like, there's a lot of, like, Southern lady writers that just kind of, like, get it.
Yeah. But Kate Chopin was always sort of fascinating to me because there was an element of... Flannery O'Connor always had, like, this very biting element to her work.
She's very sardonic.
Yes. Very much about... Flannery O'Connor was who you could depend on to tell you both how great the South was and how much the South sucked simultaneously. And Zora Neale Hurston, of course, was working from a very blue-collar sort of perspective of the South. And Kate Chopin was in this realm where she was not nearly, I would say, as sardonic as Flannery O'Connor. And she had that sort of middle class, lower middle class.
Well, you really felt like she moved between women's worlds.
Yeah.
She wasn't rich, she wasn't poor, she wasn't New South, she wasn't Old South, she was Creole, so she wasn't black, she wasn't white.
Yeah.
She really just kind of had this ambiguity and almost like slight depressive era about her.
Yeah.
But still very almost magic realism and hopeful as well. It's just really, really interesting writer. Like, highly recommended. Her stories are really short, which is like why my TA kind of recommended that. Actually they're more of like a co-teacher. So why my co-teacher recommended them is it was really good to kind of introduce the middle schoolers and the younger high schoolers to this, but also like we could walk through a really short story and have a whole bunch of different interpretations, or have them kind of like read what they were interested in or report back on it, because there were so many little things here and there with like things that we kind of highlight. And I do think the material is very accessible to middle school and high school students.
Well, and I think the thing that makes Kate Chopin fascinating for her era and her environment and everything like that is not just that ambiguity, which is a big part of it, but also the fact that of the Southern authors of the time, she seemed to have less judgment about her characters. So one of the things I always loved about Kate Chopin's prose is that she wrote about subjects and stories that I had read so many other writers, particularly Southern writers of her time, where they turned them into these big moral stories about what is and is not good behavior and what is and is not something that should be punished. And she really had a grasp of situational ethics, that what is bad for one person is not necessarily bad for another.
Yeah, and I would make the argument not only like who should be punished, but particularly like what women do should be punished or not.
Right.
Like that's what I really think is the big difference. Is I feel like all of Chopin's characters are very sympathetic.
Yeah.
Like you can see your mom or your aunt or yourself, you know, kind of in them as a woman. You're not necessarily saying like, well, this is a woman representing all of the South, or this is a woman who is representing a bad woman or a good woman.
Right, right.
Like, I think that she really, like you said, lives in that moral and ethical ambiguity as well.
Yeah. And it's, I think it's what makes her so important as an author to feminism, is that she is singularly uninterested in judging her female protagonists for what they do.
Yeah. And I think that she was also writing at a time like that's very similar to a time that we're living in right now, where people are having these debates about is stealing good or bad? Is starving good or bad? You know, what makes a person ethical in the survival of their families and of themselves? And that's really what Chopin's characters focus on, to be honest.
Yeah. So let's talk about, this is a question I asked you earlier today. When I was like trying to get a feel for what I should tell people we were going to talk about today and everything. So when you see the idea of a musical based on Kate Chopin, do you have a particular work, or do you see it as like a mashup of her work? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I actually do have a particular work in mind, although I think that you could almost... And almost like a big fish style, you could mash a whole bunch of things together. But I do have a specific work I'm really kind of thinking of in particular, just because I really like it, and I think you could expand the story into something that makes it even more human. But I also feel like her writing is so lyrical as well. Like, you know, I do feel like you could thematically put a bunch of her stories together and kind of create like a symphony piece. Yeah. But I pulled up just a list of all of her works because she did write short stories.
Yeah.
These were appearing in things like magazines and like little short story collections. So that's how she kind of like made her living, by selling these little itty bitty stories in women's magazines and newspapers and stuff like that. So my favorite piece.
Let's see if this is the same one that I would jump at if I was thinking about adapting Kate Chopin.
Is a pair of silk stockings.
That is it. that was going to be the one that I was like, that would make a great show.
Yeah. And in fact, you know, if you just go to katechopin.org, KATECHOPIN.org, this is not an ad, but, you know, it is a 4-page short story. And this is why I think it's, like, really good to introduce kids, like, when they're in, like, you know, 7th or 8th grade or 9th or 10th grade. Because I think that, okay, telling somebody go home and read 20 pages of Romeo and Juliet is sometimes hard. Not impossible, but sometimes hard. But saying, I want you to read 4 pages.
Yeah.
And it's for free online.
Yeah.
Like, that's why we kind of taught it, is we were looking for stuff that was in the public domain because we didn't have a lot of materials to buy books. So, but, I mean, this is great. And it's one of my favorite pieces because I really feel like, at the time, really for the past 10 years, like, you don't go into theater and not realize you're going to struggle, right? You know, you kind of make these decisions. But we were struggling really bad there from about 2015 to about now.
Yeah.
I mean, things are fine. Like, we get through it. But
It's fine. It's fine.
2015 was real bad. 2015, 2016. Like, it just seemed like everything was really grinding us down. Like, we're kind of talking about, like, I got very sick for a good 6 weeks there.
Yeah.
Like, and nobody could tell me what it was. And you were having a really hard time finding a job. And I was working like 5 or 6 jobs at once, just like trying to freelance. And we recently moved into a bigger apartment because we thought, oh, like things are going to get better.
Yeah.
They did eventually, but they didn't at the time. So I think that, you know, we were definitely having a moment of, gosh, is this all there is to life? Is waking up at 4:30 in the morning, going to job 1, driving from Floyd back to Blacksburg to go to job 2, taking a little break for lunch, and then going to job 3, you know, taking a little dinner break, going to job 4, teaching theater at night, doing a play, going to sleep. So it was like from 4:30 until like 11:30. Like, it was just constant going. And this is before, like, you started even, like, being able to drive me around. Like, you were just looking for jobs all the time. You were always in Radford looking for work. And so I was just driving the car all over. And it was, like, those moments where it's like, well, the road would be flooded from Christiansburg to Floyd. And I have to just turn around and say, I guess I'm not teaching class today. And so it was just a really, really rough time. And so Pair of Silk Stockings really spoke to me because it was a woman similarly going through a really rough time. And she had dreams about, well, what would it be like if I wasn't me? If I could have the things I wanted, if I could be who I wanted to be. And it all starts with a pair of silk stockings. And I think that some of the more interesting conversations we had with the kids about it was like, do you think she was right or was she wrong to buy this pair of silk stockings? And I think that because that's just such an interesting thing, and you start to learn about, well, this is what I believe, or this is what my community believes, or this is what I've heard from my folks, or stuff like that. It was just really, really amazing at how many different opinions, almost many as different opinions as there are kids about it. I just really like it, and I really, for a 4-page story, I'd love to see a 40-page book about it. You know, like a musical story. And I also feel like it has that quality that, you know, you think of things like Rhapsody in Blue or An American in Paris, where there's these balletic pieces where it's like you just see a character dance. And most of the story takes place as she's on, I think these are all in New Orleans. She's on a trolley car. And so you just think, like, you can just hear the sounds of New Orleans and having kind of like this lyrical moment about it. So that's my favorite. But I mean, like, there are a lot of themes like it. Like, I think The Locket and The Awakening, like, there's a whole bunch of things about women making choices and, you know, some thematic elements that you can do. But, like, I'd really love to try to just do a pair of silk stockings the whole way through.
I think a pair of silk stockings, like you said, the story is only 4 pages long. But it's one of my favorite Kate Chopin stories because that 4 pages is just so richly dense. There's so much going on psychologically in those 4 pages, so much going on in backstory that's communicated in just a few words, that I feel like there's a lot of material you could dive into for a show. And I'm always of the opinion that when you're adapting something, the less the source material gives you to work with, the better. I'm going to go completely off the rails here in terms of what I'm discussing. But think about video games. Video game movies have gotten to be very popular recently, where they take a video game that's popular and they adapt it to a movie. And I look at a lot of those and I'm like, well, you know, the real problem with a lot of those adaptations is that the video games have such deep lore. Sometimes they're talking about franchises that have hours of gameplay, hundreds of hours of gameplay for each game, and they're up to number 6 or 7 in the series. And I'm like, if you want to adapt a video game and have a good movie based on it, adapt Yar's Revenge. Adapt something that didn't actually tell you a story on the screen, but just gave you, like, the characters and the situation and then go to it. And you look at something like a pair of silk stockings in comparison to The Awakening. The Awakening is a phenomenal story, and I think that could make a great musical as well. But I feel like The Awakening, you would wind up having to cut material in order to get it on stage. And a pair of silk stockings, you could put every second of that story on stage.
Yeah, and what I think I really like about it is that so many things we're dealing with like now, like it's almost so timeless. Like it doesn't matter whether I'm setting it back at Restoration New Orleans or turn of the century New Orleans or Jazzy's New Orleans or now New Orleans. One of the big pieces I think that was always my takeaway from it is, do we deserve nice things, to be honest? Like, do we deserve things? I think that there's a huge political rhetoric around, no, nobody owes you anything. You don't deserve anything. Like, you know, and then there's other people that are, no, you should have a universal basic income. You should have health care when you need it. Like, there's a certain humanity that entitles you to dignity.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's not even a question of, like, earning nice things. It's just a question of, like, what makes us feel like a human being.
Yeah.
And is being ground into the dirt,
yes.
You know, a way to be a human being? Or is grabbing happiness being a human being? Or is pretending being a human being? I mean, there's just like a lot of different things and a lot of different ways I think people live their life. Like, there's a phrase that I've heard so much from younger colleagues saying, like, I'm just going to fake it till I make it.
Yeah.
You know? There's a lot of times people will say, like, well, you have to invest in that good suit you can't afford, because how else are you going to get that job unless you dress for the job you want to have? And I think that all of these things are really caught up in a pair of silk stockings. Yeah. And I think that you really have to sit there and think, what makes a human life worth living?
Yeah.
And gosh, if that's not the pandemic.
Well, and if that is not a theme that sounds like a Broadway theme to me, what makes life worth living is, I feel like,
and through a woman's perspective. Like, I mean, we've had a man's perspective of a lot of that.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's just really lovely, like, you know, to have a, you know, potential female author, potential female director, you know, it's like, it just seems like being able to tell that story, having kind of another, gosh, even like star vehicle, like you could just see the songs that are going to be sung by a future starlet on this. And, and I think that, you know, that's a big question we ask around art to begin with as well. It's like, you know, we deal with, you know, imposter syndrome and insecurities all the time of like, well, is creating art what makes it worth living? Is sharing that art what makes it worth living? You know, we deal with that, like, to some extent as musical creators, as musical writers, as musical lovers. I think a lot of us at the beginning of the pandemic were like, oh, if I just make things. And I think a lot of us are really realizing, like, but it's the sharing of that. It's the communication aspect of it. It's not just the making things just to make things or making it for myself. It's like, I enjoy the community aspect of it. So I don't know. I highly recommend. Read this 4 pages. If you're looking for something to get you off of Twitter. Go ahead and read it. You can feel free to tweet at us. You can feel free to make some comments on the YouTube. You can make some comments in the chat. But it's 4 pages. Go read it. I think that the protagonist is really interesting. I think it would make a dynamic, expansive piece to her story, because I think that, you know, her story begins earlier and goes beyond this one day. And I think that would be kind of interesting to flesh it out. I think also kind of getting into the minutia of the day and the decision making. And, you know, we talked about watching Howard, which was the documentary about Howard Ashman, and how whenever you have tension, that's when you have to sing. This whole piece is tension, you know? So she got a lot of songs in her heart.
So I think that is, I think that is a phenomenal story to dive into. Like I said, every second of that story could go onto the stage in a single show. And when I say that, I don't just mean every second of, like, the story, the actual physical things that happen. I mean, you could take the moments, the psychological moments of that, and draw them out and fully explore them. And I think I think out of all of her works, you picked a particularly great one there.
And because this is a short story, this is also going to be
Yeah.
a shorter episode.
Yes.
We don't have songs to present on these things. I think maybe, if we continue this in the future, we might have to cut down a little bit on our presentations and then maybe focus on kind of the production values, especially if we keep investing in our production.
Yeah.
But we hope that you kind of enjoyed having a little bit of a shorter piece from us today so that you'll have time to go do things that you really love. And also that, if you'd like to read those 4 pages and get back to us. We're going to kind of keep doing this on Saturday. We won't be talking about, my story, but we will be talking about Glenn's choice.
And my first choice, yes, happy to be discussing one of your favorite stories. My choice for this coming Saturday is not as... I'm not going to say it's not as good. It's not as...
Different.
Yes, it's not as rich, let's say that. Because my story, I decided to go with an author who is very much not Kate Chopin. Someone who was known for more lighthearted fare. Someone whose work is very pleasant and funny. So this Saturday I'm going to be discussing my ideas for a musical based on the work of John Kendrick Bangs, who is one of my favorite early American comedy writers, and also one of my favorite early American ghost story writers.
I feel like the difference is that I picked the ballet.
Yes.
And you picked vaudeville.
Yes. That's a very good way of putting it.
Both very good.
Yes.
We enjoy both very much.
Yes. You picked opera. I picked light comic operetta.
I feel like this is like, if you went back through our whole childhoods, that's basically us.
Yes. All right, but that's what we'll be talking about on Saturday. And I think that is going to do it for us today. So thank you for joining us. It's been wonderful having you here. If you're catching us later on YouTube, please drop down into the comments and let us know what you thought about the ideas
or if
we
you
discussed.
like a different Kate Chopin story, or if you're like, Bree, you're pronouncing her name wrong. It's Chopin, or it's Chopin, or whatever. I heard it a whole bunch of different ways. I just pronounce it the way I pronounce it. I am willing to be taught.
Yes. But yeah, drop into the comments on YouTube and let us know. We do have a Patreon. We do have a Ko-Fi. Well, I have a Patreon.
Yeah.
We have a Ko-Fi for the QuaranStream, which has been cycling by down there this entire time.
I know we have to look around the light now.
Yes, and there's...
We're going to get it together one of these days.
There's also a bookshop you can go to and see some of the things.
And if we can find some books of hers to put on the bookshop, we'll do it. But what's so great about her material is it is all fairly public domain.
Yes.
So if you go to that website, again, katechopin.org, you can look at the majority of her work for free. So that's one of the nice things, that even though we love it when you shop through a bookshop, that has happened. Yay,
yes,
thank you.
Thank you so much.
But please, like, there's really nothing except, like, your own, time.
Yeah.
To say, like, if you don't want to read it. But I think 4 pages and free is pretty good.
Yes.
If you're looking for that great pandemic deal. But we love you so much. Thank you so much. Enjoy, television for this evening. We've heard a couple of plans for folks.
Yes.
And we'll see you on Saturday.
Yes. And until next time, take care of yourself out there, because we're not there to take care of you.
Bye.